Celia was young, intelligent, and full of ambition. As a historian from the proud Valeri race, she had spent years studying the old myths of countless worlds. Of all the stories in the galactic archives, one particular set always stood out. They were called the human legends, strange tales of a species that had vanished long ago. Stories of humans defeating monsters, conquering impossible challenges, and taming forces that no other civilization could. To Exelia, these were nothing more than the overactive imaginations of ancient peoples, exaggerated myths twisted over time. Humans had been nothing more than a primitive species, and the idea that they had been anything more seemed impossible. How could a simple species like humans have had such power? It made no sense. Celia spent many late nights poring over the archives, reading the same ridiculous tales again and again. Humans had defeated dragons with their bare hands. They had destroyed entire fleets with nothing but their minds. The thought of it was laughable. Her fellow historians would often joke about the human legends, mocking the idea that such wild stories could be true. Yet, despite the laughter, there was a part of Exelia that couldn't help but wonder why so many civilizations seemed to have legends of the humans. It was as if the entire galaxy had been impacted by their existence, even long after they were gone. One evening, as Exelia sat in the quiet solitude of the galactic archives, a transmission came in. It was from the Valeri Council, a group of influential leaders who had always respected her work. The message was simple but urgent. Join the research team heading to the Forbidden Zone. We need your expertise. The Forbidden Zone was a region of space shrouded in mystery. It was a dead zone, a place where no ships had returned for thousands of years. Some said it was cursed. Others believed it was a graveyard for ancient civilizations. However, the Council had uncovered new information: an old star system believed to be the site of a long-lost human colony. It was said that the humans had once inhabited this system, but no one knew what had happened to them. For centuries, the planet had been left untouched, forbidden to anyone who dared explore it. Despite her skepticism about the human legends, Celia couldn't resist the invitation. The chance to visit a place where humans had once lived was too tempting to pass up. The next day, she boarded the research ship, accompanied by a team of scientists, archaeologists, and other historians. As the ship sped through the stars, Exelia couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement mixed with doubt. Was she about to find something truly remarkable, or would this be another wild goose chase based on myths? Upon arrival, the team marveled at the sight of the planet. It was barren and desolate, with deep craters and a surface marked by the passage of time. The atmosphere was thin, and the landscape was harsh. Yet, buried beneath the dust and debris, Celia could see signs of something ancient. There were ruins, tall structures that had once been grand, now fallen into ruin. The architecture was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was both alien and strangely familiar. This wasn't like anything the Valeri had ever built, nor did it resemble the style of any other species. It was human. As they ventured deeper into the planet's surface, they discovered a massive underground structure. The walls were lined with strange symbols, and the air was thick with the scent of age. Celia, though skeptical, couldn't deny the feeling that something important was hidden here. She felt a twinge of excitement. Perhaps the human legends had a grain of truth after all. As they explored further, the team discovered what appeared to be a sealed chamber. A massive stone door stood before them, covered in the same unfamiliar symbols. One of the archaeologists, a young Valeri named Karan, stepped forward and began analyzing the door's mechanism. "There's something strange about this," Karan muttered, his fingers tracing the symbols. "These markings aren't just decorative. They're a warning." Celia rolled her eyes. "A warning? About what?" Human ghost?" Karan shot her an irritated glance but continued his work. "I'm serious. These symbols, they speak of something that should never be disturbed." Despite his words, Celia was more interested in the structure than the symbols. Humans were long gone. There was no reason to fear their old technology. But as the door slowly creaked open, a deep, resonant hum filled the chamber, sending a chill down Celia's spine. The air shifted, and for a moment, the room felt alive, as though something had awoken from a long slumber. Suddenly, there was a bright flash of light, and Excelia staggered back, shielding her eyes. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The team's communication systems began to glitch, and their equipment flickered wildly. The door opened wider, revealing a large chamber filled with metal structures, strange machines, and a single enormous pod at the center. Celia's heart raced. What was this place? What had they uncovered? As the team cautiously approached the pod, a low mechanical hum filled the air. The pod's lid began to rise, and Excelia froze. A figure emerged from the pod tall, clad in ancient, battle-worn armor. Its face was hidden behind a helmet, but its eyes glowed with a faint, eerie light. Who disturbs the first soldier? The voice that came from the figure was deep and commanding, sending a wave of shock through the team. Celia felt her breath catch in her throat. This wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a myth. This was real, a human, standing before them, alive after thousands of years. The figure stepped forward, its gaze scanning the team. Celia struggled to find her voice. "What are you? What are you?" she stammered. The human's helmet tilted slightly, as if studying her. "I am Commander Rael Thorn," he said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I was placed in stasis to protect what remains of the Terran legacy." Celia's mind raced. She had read about humans in the archives. She had laughed at their legends. And now, here one stood before her, as real as any Valari. But there was more. The stories, the myths, had they been true all along? Before she could speak, the ship's sensors began to beep urgently. "Another ship is approaching," one of the scientists said, his voice trembling. "It's not from our fleet. It's an enemy ship. It's here to take whatever is hidden on this planet." Rael Thorn turned toward the team. "I suggest you follow my lead," he said. "The time for legends is over. The time for war has begun." And just like that, the room shifted from one of awe to action. The team, with the human warrior at their side, was about to discover that the legend of the humans was not one of fantasy. It was a story of power, survival, and resilience, one that would change the galaxy forever. The ship lurched as it made its way through the deep silence of space, the stars outside appearing as nothing more than distant, cold pinpricks of light. Inside, the team of explorers sat in a tense silence, each person lost in their thoughts. Celia, the lead historian, sat near the front, staring out of the large viewport. She had studied many worlds in her life, but this journey felt different. The Forbidden Zone, an area of space considered a dead zone by most of the galaxy, was a place where no one dared venture. Ships that entered were said to disappear without a trace, lost forever in the unknown. Yet, here they were, on a mission that had been deemed too dangerous for any ordinary crew. Celia wasn't worried, at least. Not yet, but something about this place felt wrong, like an ancient curse hanging over it. For years, the Valari had avoided this region. It was filled with myths of ships that entered, never to return, and whispers of strange, long-forgotten technologies left by civilizations that had vanished without explanation. Some said the Forbidden Zone was cursed, while others believed it was the home of an ancient weapon, something so powerful that even the stars themselves feared it. But there was one thing that couldn't be denied. Hidden somewhere within the heart of the Forbidden Zone was the planet Exelva, a world believed to be the last home of the humans, an extinct species that had once been feared across the galaxy. Celia had no interest in legends. She was a historian, not a believer in myths. But as the ship moved closer to its destination, the sense of unease only grew. She had heard the stories, just like everyone else. Humans had been an ancient species, and though they were long gone, their legacy had lived on in the tales passed down through generations. No one knew what had truly happened to them, but many believed they had been wiped out by their enemies in a war that had shaken the very foundations of the galaxy. Whatever the truth, Celia had always dismissed these stories as nothing more than exaggerated fantasy. After all, humans were nothing more than a primitive race. Their legends couldn't possibly be true, could they? As the ship descended toward Exelva, it was a barren, desolate world, with deep, craggy canyons stretching across its surface like scars. The atmosphere was thin, and the entire planet was shrouded in a constant storm of dust and ash. Nothing had lived here for centuries, if not longer. The planet felt dead, so dead that it made Celia feel a chill she couldn't quite shake. The ship touched down on the surface, its engines roaring in protest against the harsh winds outside. The team disembarked, their boots crunching against the dusty ground as they made their way toward the ruins of what once had been a thriving city. Celia's heart raced with anticipation. This was it, the last trace of humanity, lying forgotten in the ruins of a lost world. The city, or what remained of it, was a jumble of shattered stone and twisted metal. It looked like a battlefield, with massive structures toppled over, their once great spires now reduced to rubble. Celia marveled at the architecture. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Some of the buildings were familiar in shape, yet they seemed strangely advanced, as if the humans had mastered technologies far beyond their time. There were no signs of life, no animals, no plants, only the ruin of a once great civilization. They walked for hours, scanning the area for any signs of the past, any clues to what had happened here. But it was as if the city itself was dead, devoid of anything that could explain its fall. That was until they reached the central plaza. In the middle of the plaza stood a massive structure, a monument of sorts, carved into the stone itself. It was a statue, though it didn't resemble any form of life that Exelia had ever seen. The figure was humanoid, but its features were strange, almost alien, with long, flowing robes that seemed to ripple as if alive. The eyes, though carved from solid stone, seemed to follow them as they moved. There was an eerie, unsettling feeling about the statue, as though it was watching them, waiting for them to make the wrong move. One of the archaeologists, Karan, stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. This is wrong, he said. I've never seen anything like this. It feels alive. Celia didn't understand what Karan meant, but as she studied the statue, a strange feeling crept over her. She couldn't shake the sensation that they weren't alone. The wind howled around them, the only sound in the oppressive silence. As the team gathered around the statue, Celia's eyes were drawn to a small plaque at its base, covered in dust and worn by time. She knelt down and carefully wiped it away, revealing a series of symbols, ancient human script. This must be the key to understanding what happened here, Celia muttered to herself. She pulled out her datapad and began to scan the symbols. As the pad processed the data, it suddenly froze, its screen flickering in and out of focus. A strange, buzzing sound filled the air, and Exelia felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Something was wrong. Before anyone could react, the ground beneath them trembled. The statue, once still, began to shift. Slowly, it moved as though coming to life. Zelia gasped in shock as the figure's stone hand slowly rose from the pedestal. It wasn't a statue, after all, it was something far more ancient. "Get back!" shouted Karan, his voice filled with panic. The team scrambled to retreat as the figure's other hand rose, and a deep, resonant voice filled the air, echoing across the plaza. "You have awakened the guardian of Exelva. You have disturbed the peace of the Ancient Ones." Celia's heart pounded in her chest as she stumbled backward, her mind racing. This wasn't just a monument, it was a sentient being, a relic of humanity's forgotten past, and it had been waiting for someone to come. The legends were true, humanity had left behind something far greater than anyone had ever realized. The ground continued to shake as the Guardian's eyes glowed with an eerie light. Celia realized they had made a terrible mistake. The Forbidden Zone wasn't cursed by the galaxy's myths, it was protected, guarded by the very thing the humans had left behind. And now, they had triggered something that could not be stopped. With a loud crack, the Guardian's stone body fully lifted from the pedestal, revealing a massive machine hidden beneath it. The sound of grinding metal filled the air as the ancient weapon began to activate. Celia's mind raced, there was no time left. The galaxy had forgotten about humanity for a reason. Their legacy wasn't just a story, it was a warning. ASC, the Guardian began to speak again. Exelia turned and ran, knowing that they had only one chance to escape. But even as she fled, the truth of the human legends struck her like a bolt of lightning. The galaxy was about to witness the return of the humans' most terrifying creation. The silence of the ancient ruins was broken only by the soft crunch of footsteps on the dusty ground. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the crumbling stone structures. For centuries, these ruins had been forgotten, their history lost to the sands of time. But now, after all these years, they were about to reveal their secrets. Professor Callan Munro stood at the edge of the ancient city, gazing at the weathered remains of a once great civilization. His team, a group of explorers and archaeologists, had spent weeks preparing for this moment. They had traveled across the galaxy to reach this forgotten world, a planet long shrouded in mystery. According to the old texts, this was the place where humanity's ancestors had once lived, and now, after millennia, they were finally standing at the entrance to their ancient home. Munro had heard the legend stories of the humans' mysterious disappearance, of their technology and knowledge that had been lost to time. The galaxy had forgotten them, and no one had dared to venture into this long-forgotten place. It was said that those who entered the ruins never returned. The warnings had been clear: do not awaken what sleeps. But Munro, a scientist at heart, had never been one to heed superstitions. He was here to discover the truth. "Are you sure about this, Professor?" Elena, the lead archaeologist, asked from behind him. Her voice was tinged with hesitation. "I mean, we've uncovered so much already, but this place—" She gestured toward the dark entrance of a massive stone structure, its door slightly ajar as if waiting for them. Munro turned, his eyes glinting with excitement. "We're standing at the threshold of history, Elena. This is what we've been looking for. Humanity's legacy awaits us inside." The group exchanged nervous glances, but followed Munro as he stepped forward, leading the way into the darkness of the ruins. The air inside was cool and thick with the scent of ancient decay. Their lights flickered as they moved deeper into the building, revealing walls covered in strange symbols, hieroglyphs that no one had been able to decipher. They walked for what felt like hours, descending into the heart of the ruins. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the silence became. It was as if the very air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Munro's heart raced with anticipation. He had studied every scrap of history related to this place, but nothing could have prepared him for the sense of unease that began to crawl up his spine. Finally, they reached a vast chamber, its walls adorned with intricate carvings of human figures and strange, glowing stones embedded in the walls. In the center of the room stood a massive structure, a cylindrical object covered in layers of dust and ancient debris. It was unlike anything Munro had ever seen. It looked almost like a tomb, but its purpose was unclear. "This is it," Munro whispered, his voice barely audible. "This is what we've been searching for. The heart of their civilization." Elena stepped forward, cautiously brushing away some of the debris. As her hand touched the surface, the ground beneath their feet trembled. A deep, low hum echoed through the chamber, reverberating in their bones. Munro's heart skipped a beat as the object in the center began to glow faintly, its surface rippling as if something inside was awakening. "What's happening?" one of the team members, Harris, asked, his voice filled with panic. Munro didn't have an answer. He only knew that something was changing. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, and the air became thick with tension. The hum grew louder, and then, with a violent jolt, the cylindrical object shot a beam of light into the ceiling. The force of the explosion sent them all sprawling to the ground. Dazed and disoriented, Munro struggled to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. The chamber was now lit by the eerie glow of the object, which had shifted. Its surface was no longer still. It was alive, vibrating, as if something within it had been awakened. "I think we made a mistake," Elena said, her voice shaking. This is no ordinary artifact. It's not just a tomb, it's something far more dangerous." Munro's eyes widened as he looked around. The symbols on the walls were shifting, changing before his. New patterns. The glowing stones embedded in the walls flickered like stars, casting strange shadows on the ground. "We have to leave," Harris said urgently, grabbing Munro's arm. "This place is cursed. It's awakening something we shouldn't have disturbed." But Munro stood frozen, his gaze locked on the object in the center of the room. He could feel the pulse of energy within it, and it called to him, urging him to understand, to uncover its secrets. "Elena," Monroe said, his voice trembling with awe, "I don't think we can leave. Not until we know what this is." Before she could respond, a voice echoed through the chamber. It was a deep, resonant sound, not from any of them, but from the very walls themselves. "Who dares to awaken the Ancient Ones?" The voice boomed. Monroe froze. The voice was ancient, full of power, and yet there was something hauntingly familiar about it. The room grew colder, the air thicker. The walls seemed to close in, and the ground shook again. "It's alive," Elena whispered, stepping back in horror. The legends were true. The humans, whatever they were, they didn't disappear. They left something behind. The voice came again, louder this time. "You seek knowledge. But knowledge comes at a price." A blinding flash of light filled the room, and Monroe staggered back, his vision swimming. When the light faded, the chamber was silent once more, but something had changed. The cylindrical object in the center had opened, revealing a dark, hollow interior. Inside, a faint, glowing figure stood human in shape, but its form was composed entirely of light and shadow, an ethereal being. "This is humanity's true legacy," Monroe whispered, his voice trembling. "They left behind a part of themselves, something that transcends death." The figure spoke again, its voice a mix of sorrow and power. "You have awakened me, but you are not ready for the truth. The price of knowledge is steep, and the consequences unimaginable." The chamber fell silent once more, the glow of the object dimming. Monroe stood in stunned silence, the weight of the encounter pressing down on him. They had uncovered something far beyond their understanding. The legends had not been wrong. Humanity had left behind a legacy, but it was one that no one was prepared for. And now, with the awakening of this ancient force, the galaxy would never be the same again. The wind howled through the empty streets of the abandoned city, carrying with it the whispers of a forgotten past. The city had once been a bustling metropolis, filled with the laughter and cries of its people. Now, only silence remained. Its towering buildings, cracked and broken, stood as a testament to time's relentless march. But deep within the heart of the city, there was a story that refused to die. A legend. Professor Hannah Caldwell had heard the stories everyone had. The legend of the human hero who had fought back against impossible odds, who had brought peace to the galaxy, and then vanished without a trace. Some said it was a myth, a tale woven from the threads of hope and desperation. Others believed it to be the truth, though no one had ever found proof. Hannah had spent years studying the ancient texts, searching for clues that might shed light on the legend's authenticity. But she was no closer to finding an answer than when she had first started. It was on one of her last expeditions, in the ruins of this forgotten city, that she uncovered something that would change everything. The discovery was hidden deep within a collapsed building, buried under layers of debris and dust. She'd been looking for artifacts, remnants of the past, but what she found was far more than she had ever expected. A metallic object, small and unassuming, lay half-buried beneath a pile of rubble. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Its surface was smooth and metallic, and it seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. There was no inscription, no markings, no indication of its origin. But something about it called to her. As she carefully reached out to touch it, a jolt of energy shot through her hand, sending a rush of warmth through her entire body. For a moment, everything went still. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, the object began to hum softly, and Hannah felt the ground beneath her feet tremble. The building creaked, as if the very bones of the city were waking up. Her heart raced as she pulled her hand away from the object, her mind racing with questions. What had she uncovered? Was it connected to the legend? The hum grew louder, vibrating through the air, and then, to her amazement, the object began to glow. It wasn't just a faint light, it was a bright, pulsing energy that filled the room. The walls seemed to ripple, as if the city itself was alive. Hannah could feel the energy of the object reaching into her mind, filling her with an overwhelming sense of power and knowledge. Is this the legend? She whispered to herself, her voice trembling. As if in answer, A voice echoed through the chamber, deep and ancient, yet strangely familiar. The legend does not die. It lives in you. Hannah froze. The voice was not human, it was something else. Something ancient, something that had been waiting for centuries. The air around her seemed to thicken, as if the very atmosphere of the city was changing. She looked around, half expecting to see someone standing behind her. The voice continued, its tone both soothing and terrifying at the same time. You seek the truth. But the truth is not what you think. The legend is real, but it is not the way you believe. The hero you seek is not gone. They have simply been waiting for the one who will awaken them. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and for a moment, Hannah was too stunned to move. The legend, the stories of the great hero who had saved the galaxy, had always seemed like nothing more than a fable. But now, with the energy in the room swirling around her, she felt something shift within her, a deep, primal connection to something far greater than herself. She'd heard rumors, whispers in the dark corners of the galaxy, about a human with powers beyond comprehension. A warrior who had fought in the shadows, a savior who had vanished without a trace. The stories said that this person was not a mere soldier, but something more, something extraordinary. Hannah had always dismissed these tales as myth, but now she wasn't so sure. The object in her hands pulsed again, and the room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in. The air grew warmer, and a new presence filled the space, an energy that hummed with power. It was as if something had awoken, something ancient and untouchable. The voice spoke once more, this time with more urgency. You must leave this place, Hannah Caldwell. You must leave now, before it is too late. The legend lives, and with it, a power that no one can control. Hannah's heart raced. But what is this? What have I found? You have found the key, the voice replied, growing fainter. The key to the legend, the key to the power that sleeps within. Only you can unlock it. A sudden flash of light filled the room, blinding her momentarily. When her vision returned, she was no longer standing in the crumbling ruins of the city. Instead, she was in a place that felt different. The air was heavy with the scent of something ancient, and the ground beneath her feet felt solid, yet somehow distant. She was no longer alone. Before her stood a figure, tall and regal, their face hidden beneath a hood. The figure exuded an aura of immense power, a presence that made the very air vibrate. Hannah's breath caught in her throat as she realized what she was seeing. This was the legend. This was the hero of the story standing before her, alive and real. You have awakened me, the figure said, their voice deep and resonant. And now, you must help me fulfill the promise of the past. The galaxy is in peril, and only together can we stop what is coming. Hannah felt a surge of emotion, a mix of awe and fear rushing through her. The legend had not died. It had simply waited for someone like her to awaken it. And now, the fate of the galaxy rested in their hands. The figure stepped forward, extending a hand toward her. Come, Hannah Caldwell. It is time for the legend to live once more. Without hesitation, she took the figure's hand, feeling a rush of energy flood through her. She knew, in that moment, that her life would never be the same. The legend had returned, and with it, a new chapter was about to begin. The galaxy was a vast, unpredictable place. Planets rose and fell, civilizations built and crumbled, and yet, throughout it all, there had been one constant, the fear of humanity. For centuries, humans had been viewed as primitive, weak, and inconsequential. Their small planet had been on the fringes of the galaxy, ignored by the larger, more advanced civilizations. But all that had changed. The first encounter with humanity had been swift, and it had shattered the arrogance of the galaxy's elite. A warship, a marvel of human engineering, had arrived at the center of a massive alien empire, its weapons capable of destroying entire fleets in a single strike. The aliens, who had once laughed at the idea of humans being a threat, were now struggling to comprehend what they had unleashed. What they had feared was no longer just a story. It was real. It all started with Captain Riker, a seasoned commander of the Terran fleet who'd been tasked with leading humanity's first strike against the powerful and hostile alien race known as the Tsar. The Tsar had long terrorized human colonies, enslaving or annihilating anyone who resisted them. Humanity, once helpless in the face of such power, had finally decided to fight back. And it was not just any fight, it was a declaration of the future, a promise that humanity would no longer be the underdog. The Tsar, who had conquered countless worlds, had underestimated the humans' resolve. Their ships were sleek, their technology advanced, but they had failed to account for the unyielding determination of a species pushed to the edge. The humans had something the Tsar could not fathom, a fierce will to survive, a fire that burned brighter the more they were oppressed. Captain Riker stood at the helm of the warship, gazing out at the swirling stars beyond. The battle had already begun. His orders had been simple: strike first, strike hard, and show the Tsar that humanity was no longer to be dismissed. But as he watched the Tsar fleet ahead, he knew that their arrogance was about to cost them. They had underestimated humanity's strength, and it was something they would soon regret. The Tsar fleet came into view, a massive armada that could swallow entire planets with ease. Riker's heart raced, but his mind remained focused. He had trained for this moment his entire life. The tension was palpable as the first wave of Tsar ships surged forward, their weapons charging. Without hesitation, Riker gave the command. "Fire," he ordered. The Terran warship unleashed its firepower, a blinding flash of energy that tore through the Tsar fleet. In a matter of moments, their ships were disintegrating into nothingness, their once proud empire crumbling before humanity's might. The shockwave from the blast sent ripples through space, shaking the Tsar to their core. They had never seen such a display of force before. The humans had arrived, and they were not here to negotiate. On the battlefield, the Tsar commanders scrambled to regroup, their pride wounded, their fear growing. They had expected a fight, but not this. The humans' weapons were unlike anything they had ever encountered: fast, precise, and utterly devastating. The Tsar were not used to being on the receiving end of such an attack, and the sight of their ships falling one by one struck terror into their hearts. The humans did not stop. They pressed the attack with ruthless precision, overwhelming the Tsar defenses and leaving them no room to maneuver. Riker's orders were clear: destroy everything. There was no room for mercy, no time for hesitation. The Tsar had terrorized humanity for too long, and this was their reckoning. As the battle raged on, Riker's mind never wavered. He knew what was at stake. This was not just about winning a single battle, it was about securing humanity's future. The galaxy needed to understand that humanity could no longer be ignored, that humanity would not bow to any empire. The message had to be clear. Fear, respect, and the future of humanity were on the line. The final blow came swiftly. The Tsar flagship, the heart of their empire, stood before them, its massive hull bristling with weapons. But it was no match for the Terran warship. With a single, well-placed shot, the flagship exploded, its debris scattering through the void. The once proud Tsar Empire was no more. The galaxy would never be the same again. The aftermath of the battle left Riker with a feeling of satisfaction, but it was tempered by the knowledge of what was to come. The Tsar were not the only empire in the galaxy. There would be others, and they would come. The humans had proven themselves, but they had also made a powerful statement. Fear had been instilled in the hearts of their enemies, and respect had been earned. But the future was still uncertain. As Riker stood in the aftermath of the battle, the weight of his actions settled on him. He had not just won a war, he had changed the course of history. He had made sure that humanity's future would no longer be dictated by the whims of alien powers. The galaxy would remember the day when the humans had struck back, when they had demanded respect, and when they had secured their place in the stars. But Riker knew that this was only the beginning. The fear and respect humanity had earned would not last forever. There would always be those who sought to challenge them, who would try to reclaim the galaxy's power. The humans had shown their strength, but now they had to show their resilience. As the Terran warship drifted through the wreckage of the Tsar fleet, Riker's mind turned to the future. The battle for survival was far from over. The galaxy had seen what humans were capable of, and they would never forget it. But humanity's fight was just beginning. The question was no longer whether they could survive, it was whether they could thrive. And that, Riker knew, would depend on how they handled the respect and fear they had earned. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity's place in the galaxy had been secured. The era of fear and respect had begun, and there was no turning back. The galaxy would never forget the day when the humans had risen and claimed their rightful place among the stars.